This is the first TNT monologue based on my last video, the Nous Tertulias. Tertulia is actually an expression that is used by the Spaniards. When I lived in Spain, tertulias were considered to be kind of like get-togethers, gatherings, where people throw ideas off each other and create a context. I love the idea of having a context for thought and ideas. Tertulias are basically a kind of think tank for ideas, for thoughts that I might have or someone has and gets together and express. Anyway, the first TNT monologue is on my phrase that the mechanics of consciousness is uncertainty. And unconsciousness is certainty. This was the first premise. This is a thing I threw out, an idea, a thought. I'm going to, as briefly as possible, to the people that thought I was carrying on too long, but it may carry on long. I just let things come to me. I've had this, what is that? How does a thought work in the first place? How do you get a thought in the first place? How does this whole thing work? How does consciousness manifest itself? And I love the idea of creating a context for something, because without context, it's literally like a water drop on a hot plate. It just dissipates. It's like a context creates a solid footing, a grounding, something that makes us be able to relate to that thought, idea, a context. So when I say the mechanics of consciousness is uncertainty, and opposite, that unconsciousness, now it's not this, unconsciousness presupposes consciousness, but I'm using that term as a kind of play on the uncertainty and certainty idea. So I'm going to, through creating a context, I'm going to create a context for this thing that I threw out there. The TNT monologue is that first idea that I had that I want to talk about. And I think that through this self-awareness that I'm practicing, self-awareness, the ideas that come to me is a form of self-awareness. The paintings that you see are a form, it's a kind of personal tertulia that I practice on a daily basis as well, as much as I can, because I get a sense of, I feel a benefit from this in terms of my own nature, in terms of my own being, of revealing something to me. Now here's, as I say, to reveal something to me, my personal consciousness is actually realized through this sense of uncertainty every day. Every day I'm not really sure what may happen in my life in terms of primarily the work that I produce as a painter. And I think this is something that other creative art or artists in general will experience, that there is a level of, I suppose, anxiety. There is even a critic, Harold Rosenberg, that considered the modern art activity to be on a very high level of anxiety, this feeling of anxiety. Now, I prefer to call it uncertainty because anxiety has a rather negative connotation. In order for me to understand what this means to exist, and the tree falls in the forest and you don't have the ears, does it fall? This idea in terms of consciousness for me is consciousness is irrelevant if the uncertainty part of it is not active. We need to always continuously have this feeling, not of anxiety necessarily, although it seems to kind of go hand in hand, but this feeling of uncertainty. So if we go through life, if I go through my life perfectly certain about everything, I am not conscious. That's what I'm saying. I'm not conscious to the extent that what it is that I function within, as I say, this mystery, I am not conscious unless this element is working within me. I also brought up the idea of discovery as not, as I'll get to this on another monologue, the idea of discovering something is quite irrelevant other than the fact that it brings forth within me a sense of wonder about something, which is very important. So Here's the context I want to create for this idea. Without this realization, self-realization, that consciousness is dependent on the uncertainty part of ourselves, we are literally lifeless. We are thrown. We're like a water drop on a hot pavement. We're like a drop on the hot pavement. We just dissipate. This is something that is so crucial in terms of my own life becoming significant in some form or other. I'm throwing out a lot of sort of assumptions and ideas, and what's difficult with words, which is not what happens when you're using language poetically, or if you're using images to represent something, this principle of uncertainty is alive and well, whereas words, as I'm expressing to you, have a tendency to finalize and be quite fixed. There's a certainty behind words the way we perceive them. But this is not something I want to communicate. So when I reflect on this, what is important to me is not just having this idea, which is high-minded, it's like consciousness is basically uncertainty. What I'm concerned about is the context which creates something within myself that actually affects the reality that I exist in. And consciousness, I suppose we could agree, is the basis for anything that we may consider to be in existence. Without consciousness, there is no existence. It's like that tree falls. Consciousness is the ear, hearing the tree fall, in terms of existence. In as far as this idea could become quite a lengthy dissertation, I'm going to synopsize this thought of consciousness is uncertainty as it relates to our day-to-day lives, as it relates to my life, that what is functioning for me in a day-to-day way that elevates my spirit, my being, my entire being, every cell in my body exalts to be within this state of life. What is it that energizes me to be even the best that I can be? To live within this principle of uncertainty would, and I'm going to give a negative here, would isolate what I understand to be conformity. Conformity is that which drowns, which squelches the sense of consciousness that permeates everything. Just as an example, there are many examples. There's many ways to articulate and understand this idea of consciousness is basically a state of uncertainty. And everything that we experience in the world drives us toward certainty. And that is a problem. It's a big problem. And a better word for some people may be the idea of conformity. Conformity is something that keeps us out of this sphere, this incredible mystery that surrounds us every day, no matter what circumstance we're in, whether we're happy, unhappy, suffering, joyous, elated. All this comes back to a very fundamental principle, as I understand it, which is why I raised this as the first part of my topic, my tertulia, is that to live within conformity is basically a denial of what it is, this birthright that was implanted within every single cell in our body. Like the trillion cells that exist in our body are not based on conformity. It's a kind of discovery that goes on every day. And if we do not live within this sense of discovery, which can only be aided through this uncertainty, this feeling that we are subject to something that we don't understand, and there is no reason to feel anxious about this. And all of us understand the level of what is understood to be anxiety is a very debilitating aspect to our existence. The level of anxieties as they rise through fear or through dogmas that hound us, that are implanted within us from very early on. These are things as we continue on our path, we have to extricate ourselves from this. This is why this is so important to me, this concept, this idea, and that's all it is basically. Like I said, the words don't even come close to expressing the notions that I'm attempting to communicate, which is why I do paintings. But for just suffice it to say, I don't have the luxury of having you stand in front of my paintings, or as any other artist. This is why artists love the idea of exhibiting their work. It's not like as it is propagated in popular culture that your ego is raised to another level of exaltation with all the icons of our culture, the Damien Hirsts or the Robert Redfords or Clooney's or whoever, Einstein. These people are irrelevant to consciousness from the point of view of uncertainty. These are people that establish consensus, conformity, and certainty. So I suppose, like I said, this could be a very long dissertation because there's so many implications within this idea itself. And I think you know what it is? It's like I'm throwing this out because we really do need to change the way we are as human beings. We all would agree on this. Anyone that is actually, has a few brain cells left and a few, throbs going every day, there is this understanding within all of us that there needs to be a different way of doing things. And there are fundamentals within the way we function that it really helps me. I have to say, it helps me to engage with people that reflect and feel connected on this kind of level of thinking. So I'm just putting this out there to introduce a way of thinking about something that engages us in a world that we understand to be a certain way that isn't right. And which is, I'll come to my tertulia on conscience, which is like, every day I reflect on conscience. If I meditate on this is magnificent. This is a fabulous aspect to what I understand to be human, without any regard to higher thinking or intellect or brilliance or insight. All those things become level in a level playing field. Consciousness is subject for human beings to conscience, which is maybe my next part. I won't go as I outlined it in my first video on my TNT monologues. I may get right away to conscience because I love it so much. But this is just a beginning of these TNT monologues. Hope it's not too long. On the other hand, I hope it is too long, and I get rid of all the people that find myself rambling too much. Because, quite frankly, you don't know when you begin something with a preconceived idea, you're going to be screwed. You're going to be fucked. If you have a preconceived idea about anything you're encountering, you're going to be fucked. So whether this might be longer or shorter, I guess you can see on the minutes whether or not you want to listen to it. But anyway, I have to stay true to myself, and I'll continue as this spontaneity unfolds, as the spontaneity of these ideas and thoughts. And I may come back to this, the uncertainty principle, that not in any kind of way that Heisenberg might have thought, or the quantum physicist types, these charlatans that are out there trying to create certainty within this experience that we have that is so completely, totally unknown to us, but we exist in it, so we somewhere must know. I think that's all I'm driving at. We all know.